Imagine you launch your dream startup. You've got the perfect product, the killer team. You think you're in control. Then, overnight, a new government regulation makes your key ingredient 50% more expensive, or a competitor deploys AI that halves their production time. Your meticulously crafted business plan. Suddenly, a small boat adrift on an unpredictable ocean. We assume businesses dictate their own fate, but the truth is, they're constantly navigating powerful currents they didn't create.
That's exactly it, James. In our previous conversation for BUS 3306, we laid the groundwork discussing how business and society are intrinsically linked, and we introduced stakeholder theory. Businesses exist within society, and society relies heavily on businesses. But what you just described, this feeling of being at the mercy of external forces, is the core of what we're tackling today. No business, no matter how successful, operates in a vacuum.
Right. It's easy to fall into the trap of thinking a business fully controls its destiny. We focus on internal strategy, product development, marketing. But as you mentioned, Isabella, that's only part of the story. There's a vast external world shaping opportunities and challenges that businesses must respond to. This isn't just about good management, it's about survival.
Absolutely. It's a critical distinction for anyone studying business. Many new students tend to overemphasize internal control. They map out organizational charts, financial flows, and operational procedures, which are all vital. But then they overlook the giant forces acting upon all of that. Think about it. An unexpected global pandemic, a sudden shift in consumer values, or a disruptive technology can completely reshape an industry overnight, regardless of a company's internal strengths.
And we've seen this play out in real time, haven't we? Businesses that thrived for decades suddenly struggled because they couldn't adapt to an external shift they didn't foresee or couldn't influence. So what exactly do we mean when we talk about this business environment that holds so much sway?
At its simplest, the business environment encompasses everything both inside and outside an organization that impacts its operations and performance. The key, as you highlighted, is distinguishing between internal and external factors. Internal factors are those a business has direct control over: its employees, culture, resources, technology. Management can make decisions and implement changes fairly directly here.
So if customer service is lacking, a business can train its staff, right? Or if production is inefficient, they can invest in new machinery. Those are clearly internal, manageable decisions.
Precisely. But external factors, these are the much tougher nut to crack because businesses cannot control them. They can only monitor, anticipate, and adapt. Successful organizations are those that continuously scan their environment, understanding these external forces, and adjusting their strategies accordingly. It's not about commanding the waves, but learning to sail them.
And to help us understand these external forces, there's a framework often used in business strategy, isn't there? The PESTLE framework.
Yes, PESTLE is an excellent way to categorize and analyze these external influences. It stands for political, economic, social, technological, legal, and environmental factors. Even if students don't memorize the acronym, understanding each component is crucial because it gives us a structured way to think about the world outside the organization's walls.
Let's dive into the first two then. Political factors. How do political decisions truly influence a business on a daily basis?
Political factors are incredibly impactful. Governments, through their decisions, introduce policies on taxes, trade, employment, environmental standards, and even investment incentives. A new policy can either create a huge opportunity or impose significant costs. Think about a sudden increase in import taxes, for instance, which you mentioned in your opening. If you're a retailer sourcing products internationally, your entire cost structure changes overnight, or new labor laws could alter staffing costs and practices.
It's not just about tariffs either. Regulations in specific industries can be incredibly complex. I remember the example of Qatar Airways from the course material. Aviation is one of the most heavily regulated sectors globally, isn't it?
Exactly. For an airline like Qatar Airways, government agreements dictate where they can fly. Security requirements affect every single daily operation. International policies influence passenger demand. They can't just decide to ignore these. Compliance is fundamental to their continued existence. The political landscape is a constant shifting challenge for them. From political sanctions to bilateral flight agreements, everything has an impact.
So, once a business understands the political landscape, it still has to contend with the economic factors. This is perhaps where most people feel the immediate impact on their wallets.
Indeed, economic conditions are fundamental because they affect both businesses and consumers directly. We're talking about inflation, unemployment rates, exchange rates, interest rates, and overall economic growth. When inflation is high, consumers' purchasing power diminishes, which translates to lower demand for many products and services. Interest rates affect borrowing costs for businesses looking to expand, and exchange rates impact companies that import or export.
So, a manufacturing company during a recession, for example, would see reduced consumer spending and declining product demand. Their response might be to cut production or postpone expansion plans.
Precisely. Conversely, periods of strong economic growth often mean increased consumer confidence, higher demand, and greater investment opportunities. Businesses might then hire more, expand operations, and introduce new products. Understanding these economic cycles and indicators is crucial for strategic planning. It informs everything from inventory management to capital expenditure decisions.
It's clear how both political decisions and economic conditions create the macro environment in which businesses operate. They set the ground rules and influence the playing field. What this really tells us is that these aren't just abstract concepts for economists or politicians. They are daily realities that dictate success or failure for companies.
That's a perfect summation, James. These first two PESTLE factors highlight how foundational external forces are. They create the operating context. Now, let's pivot to social factors, which I think have become increasingly prominent and complex in recent years. This moves us beyond purely transactional elements to deeper human values and behaviors.
Yes, social factors really touch on the evolving human element: lifestyles, cultural values, demographics, consumer preferences. This is where companies truly have to keep their finger on the pulse of society.
Absolutely. Think about the growing awareness of environmental sustainability. 20 years ago, it wasn't a mainstream consumer concern for most people. Today, it absolutely is. Customers actively seek out businesses that reduce plastic, lower carbon emissions, source responsibly. This isn't just a niche market anymore, it's a broad societal expectation, and companies ignoring this do so at their peril.
We've seen examples like Patagonia and Blue Skies Ghana that have built their brands around these values. They're not just selling products, they're selling a commitment to social and environmental responsibility.
Exactly. These companies recognize that modern consumers reward organizations that demonstrate genuine environmental and social responsibility. But here's where it gets tricky and where a potential tension point emerges: authenticity. What if a company makes sustainability claims that customers perceive as exaggerated or misleading? We've got a term for that: greenwashing.
Greenwashing. So it's about appearing environmentally friendly without actually doing the work. This must be a huge challenge for businesses. They want to appeal to conscious consumers, but if they overstate their efforts, they risk a serious backlash and damaging their reputation.
It's a tightrope walk. Consumers are increasingly savvy and skeptical. They can spot inauthenticity. The challenge for businesses isn't just to do good, but to demonstrate it credibly. This often means investing in transparent reporting, gaining third-party certifications, and ensuring that sustainability is integrated throughout their supply chain and operations, not just in their marketing campaigns. The line between aspirational messaging and deceptive practices can be blurry, and getting it wrong can be catastrophic.
So it's not enough to say you're sustainable, you actually have to be it and prove it. That adds another layer of complexity to responding to these social factors, because it demands deep, systemic change, not just superficial adjustments.
It certainly does. Companies that authentically integrate these values often find it becomes a competitive advantage, attracting talent and loyal customers. Those that don't, or worse, engage in greenwashing, risk alienating a growing segment of the market. This reflects how profoundly social expectations are shaping the competitive landscape. If we zoom out for a moment, what this really highlights is that understanding and responding to societal values isn't an optional add-on, it's a fundamental pillar of modern business strategy.
That's a really good point. It's not just about what people buy, but what they believe. And this brings us to a useful moment to pause and reset our thinking a little bit. We've covered the macro forces of politics and economics, setting the operational stage, and now the evolving social values that influence consumer behavior and brand perception. All of these external forces demand continuous monitoring and adaptation from businesses, emphasizing that the environment isn't static, it's a dynamic, living entity that shapes every decision.
Now, let's move to technological factors. This is perhaps the most visibly disruptive force we've discussed so far, constantly reshaping industries and operations at an unprecedented pace.
Technology truly is a game changer. Businesses that fail to adapt here often find themselves obsolete very quickly. I think about banking, what it was versus what it is now.
An excellent example. Years ago, almost every banking transaction required a physical visit. Today, mobile apps allow us to transfer money, pay bills, even apply for loans from anywhere. Retail has seen similar shifts, with online platforms enabling global comparison and purchase. Companies that ignored digital transformation simply couldn't compete. Blockbuster versus Netflix is the classic illustration.
And it's not just about how customers interact with businesses, it's also about internal efficiency. AI, automation, cloud computing, data analytics, these technologies are revolutionizing internal processes too.
Absolutely. These tools allow businesses to reduce costs, improve decision-making through better insights, and serve customers more effectively. And what's fascinating is how often innovation and sustainability go hand in hand here. Better production systems reduce waste, digital documentation reduces paper, smart logistics optimize routes, cutting fuel consumption. Technology isn't just for profit, it's a powerful enabler for more sustainable operations.
So, technology isn't just a threat, it's also a massive opportunity for businesses willing to embrace it, both for efficiency and for achieving social and environmental goals.
Precisely. But embracing it requires foresight and significant investment, which brings its own set of challenges. Next, let's delve into legal factors. Every business, from a small startup to a multinational corporation, operates within a complex legal framework. This is non-negotiable.
Legal factors are about the rules of the game: employment laws, consumer protection, health and safety, competition laws, environmental regulations. Compliance seems pretty straightforward here.
It should be, and responsible businesses understand that legal compliance is essential. But here's where we get to a crucial distinction in business and society and a key tension point: the difference between legality and ethics. A business can comply fully with the law and still behave unethically. This is a nuanced area that many struggle with.
This is a really important point. Can you give an example of that, where something is perfectly legal but ethically questionable?
Certainly. Imagine a company discovers a legal loophole that allows it to avoid paying a significant amount of taxes. Technically, they're not breaking any laws, but society might still consider it unethical because the company is shirking its broader responsibility to contribute to public services that everyone benefits from, like infrastructure, education, or healthcare. Or another common one, a company might legally pay its employees the minimum wage, which is compliant, but create working conditions that are unsafe, disrespectful, or exploitative, pushing the very boundaries of legal without technically crossing them.
So a company could be fully within the bounds of the law, yet still be seen as a bad actor by the public. This puts management in a difficult position, doesn't it? Especially if exploiting that loophole or paying minimum wage maximizes short-term profits for shareholders, which is also a legal obligation.
It's a genuine dilemma, James. This is where good businesses don't simply ask, "Is this legal?" They also ask, "Is this ethical?" And those two questions don't always yield the same answer. The tension often arises because what is legal is often the minimum acceptable standard of behavior. Ethics asks us to consider what is right, what is just, and what serves the greater good, even if it goes beyond the letter of the law. Shareholders, employees, customers, and the wider community will often hold a company to a higher standard than mere legal compliance.
So managing these legal factors isn't just about having good lawyers, it's about having a strong ethical compass at the heart of the business. That seems like a really tough balance to strike in a competitive market.
It absolutely is. But it's becoming increasingly crucial for long-term sustainability and reputation. A legal win that's an ethical loss can be far more damaging in the long run. Finally, let's explore environmental factors. These have rapidly moved from being peripheral concerns to central strategic imperatives for businesses.
This is where climate change, resource scarcity, pollution, and biodiversity loss come into play. It's no longer just an issue for environmental activists, it's a board-level discussion.
Precisely. Companies now recognize that environmental sustainability directly impacts operational costs, investor confidence, customer loyalty, and long-term competitiveness. Supply chains are at risk from extreme weather events, regulations on emissions are tightening, and raw material costs are rising due to scarcity. Ignoring these factors is no longer an option.
So businesses are investing in renewable energy, recycling, cleaner production, waste reduction, not just because it's good for the planet, but because it's good for the bottom line too, in the long run.
Exactly. Take Casa Preco PLC, an example we've discussed. They're not just putting out ads about sustainability, they've invested in solar energy, water recycling, waste segregation, and tree planting. These aren't just marketing gestures, they're integrated into their operational strategy. This demonstrates how environmental factors can drive innovation and create efficiencies, rather than just being a burden.
It's a powerful illustration of moving beyond mere compliance to proactive engagement with environmental challenges. What this really tells us is that these environmental considerations are now fully integrated into the financial and strategic health of a company. If we take a moment to reflect here, we've explored the full scope of the PESTLE framework, from political and economic structures to social shifts, technological disruptions, legal requirements, and environmental imperatives. This extensive range of external factors constantly shapes a business's operational landscape and strategic direction, underscoring the dynamic nature of the business world.
Now, let's consider how these pestle factors interact. They don't operate in isolation, they constantly influence and sometimes contradict each other. This creates another layer of complexity for businesses, especially when multiple forces demand attention simultaneously. It's like trying to juggle several complex problems at once, where the solution to one might create a challenge for another.
That's a great point. How does a business navigate that? For instance, new environmental regulations might increase production costs, impacting economic factors, or technological advancements might outpace legal frameworks, creating ethical gray areas. It sounds like a constant balancing act.
It is. This brings us to another tension point. How do leaders prioritize? When you're faced with an economic downturn, a new political regulation, a rapidly shifting social expectation around sustainability, and a disruptive technology all at once, which do you address first? Is there a hierarchy or a common denominator for success?
That's a tough question. If you invest heavily in a new sustainable technology to meet social and environmental demands, but then an economic recession hits, cutting consumer spending, that investment might not pay off in the short term. Or a new political regime could change the rules entirely. It feels like every decision has ripple effects across the entire PESTLE landscape.
Absolutely. There's rarely a single master key. Often it's about identifying the most pressing and impactful factors for your specific industry and context. For an airline, political stability and fuel costs might be paramount. For a tech startup, it's technological innovation and the social adoption curve. The challenge is that these priorities can shift quickly. A political crisis might suddenly override an economic trend, or a new social movement might redefine consumer expectations almost overnight. So managing these interconnected forces requires agility and a holistic understanding of how they play off each other.
So leadership isn't just about reacting, it's about anticipating these interactions and trying to stay ahead of the curve. It sounds incredibly challenging, yet essential.
It is, and this brings us to the defining characteristic of effective managers: environmental awareness. They don't wait for problems to become crises. They pay attention to trends before they escalate. They listen to customers, monitor policy shifts, and invest in innovation before competitors force their hand.
So it's proactive, not reactive, transforming risks into opportunities. This means leaders need to be more than just good at internal operations. They need to be keen observers of the wider world.
Exactly. They have their antennae up, constantly scanning the horizon. This isn't just about reading financial reports, it's about understanding geopolitics, social psychology, technological advancements, and ecological shifts. The best leaders connect these dots. They recognize that an emerging environmental concern in one part of the world could become a global regulatory standard, or that a shift in demographic patterns could completely alter their customer base within a decade.
It's about understanding the zeitgeist of the business world, isn't it? The prevailing mood, the dominant forces, and then figuring out how your business can not only survive, but thrive within that broader context.
Precisely. That's one of the biggest lessons from studying business and society. Success is not solely determined by what happens inside an organization, how efficient its processes are, how brilliant its employees are, or how strong its financial position is. It's profoundly determined by how well that organization understands, interprets, and responds to the dynamic world around it.
This whole discussion really underscores how complex leadership is today. It's not just about managing people and products, but about being a strategic navigator in a constantly changing sea of external forces.
And it makes the case for why a holistic, stakeholder-centric approach, which we discussed earlier, is so vital. You can't navigate these external waters effectively if you're only focused on a single stakeholder, like shareholders, or if you ignore the broader societal impacts of your decisions.
So, to bring it all together, we've gone from understanding that businesses depend on society to seeing how political, economic, social, technological, legal, and environmental factors constantly shape every business decision. It's about being plugged into the global system.
That's right. The PESTLE framework isn't just an academic exercise. It's a practical toolkit for comprehending the complex external environment. Recognizing these forces, understanding their interconnectedness, and developing strategies to adapt are critical skills for any successful business leader.
And this deep dive into the business environment, particularly the legal and ethical distinctions, really sets the stage for our next conversation, doesn't it? The ethical foundations.
It certainly does. Understanding the rules of the game is one thing, but then understanding the right way to play is another entirely. This foundational understanding of the external environment is essential before we delve into the ethical dilemmas managers face and why ethical decision-making has become an indispensable element of sustainable business success. As we've seen, legality isn't always enough.
Fantastic. That concludes our exploration of the business environment and the PESTLE factors. Our source material for this episode was drawn from the course notes for BUS 3306, specifically Part 2 on Business and Society.
Thank you for joining us. If this discussion resonated with you, consider sharing it with someone who might also find it valuable.